those of you who aren't aware, hi everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel. I'm Hannah Fitzgerald, and for those of you who don't know, I make videos about writing, LARP and fashion because I can't pick a hobby. I'm also a second year university student studying a joint degree of English and History. I've been reading since I was little, and for those of you who've watched my NaNoWriMo vlogs, you also know that I love to write. I've been reading things like Dickens, Austen, as well as, obviously, kids' books since I was like 5 or 6. So yeah, I love literature. I chose to study it for a degree, but Jesus Christ, can it be up its own arse sometimes. Sometimes it feels like certain pieces of literature are written exclusively to be literature. Certain analyses feel so forced, and the canon? Don't even get me started on the canon. Because I study English literature at university and I studied it for A-levels and GCSEs through high school, I haven't really had a huge amount of time to read outside of the reading lists I've been given for those. So I've kind of been stuck with literature for quite a while. But for those of you who watch my NaNoWriMo vlogs, you'll know that I very recently read an entire book in 3 days and loved it. It was the first time I'd read a book and felt truly amazingly immersed in that world for so long. And it was YA. But because I was reading YA, it felt very different to literature, and it made me wonder why I haven't been reading any YA recently, especially since that's something I want to write. So I'm making this video to tell you why, in my own opinion, I think YA deserves better. Because it was honestly one of the best books I've read in a while. For those of you who don't know, YA stands for Young Adult and is a category or genre of books used to define books that centre around teenagers or young adult characters, hence the name, and is also aimed at an audience of people around that age. Books like Twilight, the later Harry Potter novels, and The Hunger Games fall into this category. YA has a reputation amongst those who study literature as, quite frankly, bad. People look down upon it, it's deemed less than, and overall it's not well liked. But why? Are they right? And why is YA such a big deal anyway? Firstly, let's talk about the canon. Don't even get me started on the canon. Don't even get me started on the canon. Don't even get me started on the canon. The literary canon is what defines something as a classic, and in general, what also gives it the ability to be taught in schools and universities. Shakespeare, Milton, Yeats, and Eliot are all good examples of authors considered essential to the core understanding and study of English literature. Many people have drawn up issues with the canon over the years, but in modern universities these are becoming more and more problematic as the issues just aren't being addressed. I could do a whole nother video about the canon and how absurd I personally find it, but for now the main thing to know is the canon includes very few women, very few people of colour, and very few queer people, both as authors and, quite frankly, as characters. It's incredibly male and Eurocentric, but it still defines what's taught at the highest universities in the world, like Oxford and Cambridge. Another thing to note is that genre books, like science fiction and fantasy, are almost entirely left out of the canon. And if they are included, it's because they transcend their genre. Now, I'm not arguing for YA to be included in the canon, at least not in this video. What I want to make clear is that the canon was decided by a bunch of men in the 19th century and has stayed almost exactly the same ever since, and it should not be the be-all and end-all of good literature. Next up, I was going to talk about what I love about literature, but honestly, as I was writing the script, I realised it's so subjective. I love literature because I love history, and to me it's a window into the past, or into a reflection of our past or our possible futures, and because it has characters that I can relate to and that I can learn through. Other people might love it for totally different reasons, and they're all completely valid. Wherever you love literature is personal to you, and isn't something you can quantify, and isn't something you can use in an argument as to what makes it good or not. What the canon and certain scholars might deem as good writing might be totally argued against by other scholars, students, and the public. That doesn't mean either of them are correct, it just means they have different opinions on it, because literature is an art form, and art is subjective. And because it's subjective, that means you cannot definitely define something as good literature or bad literature, as much as you might want to. So, on to the main topic of the video. Young adult fiction is integral to 21st century writing and reading. Everyone has heard of The Hunger Games and Twilight. Harry Potter is so famous it's got an entire theme park based around it. Many YA books have reached bestseller levels and won prizes and awards for their writing. It's so popular as a genre that from 2002, when there were 4,700 books being published, to 2012, it increased by double, with over 10,000 YA books published that year. Young adult fiction changed not only the writing world, but the reading world. Suddenly, instead of just writing specifically for kids or adults, writers could market to a very specific and very lucrative market: teenagers. Coming-of-age tales could be written specifically to those people who were coming of age as they read them. Teens could find escapism from the drudgery of everyday life in characters and stories that echoed themselves and the struggles that they have to go through. YA also became increasingly popular as adaptations. Movie adaptations like Fault in Our Stars or Divergent, and TV show adaptations like Vampire Diaries or Pretty Little Liars, which have garnered huge success over the years. I mean, just look at the Netflix new page. It's half book adaptations these days. And, most importantly in my opinion, YA became a place for diversity to blossom. More and more young adult books began to include diverse casts, deal with difficult topics such as racism and sexuality, and overall just introduce things that adults in the media tend to stray away from. For teenagers, it became a great way to learn about growing up, going through puberty, and the good and evils of the world. And yes, I will concede, there's some bad YA out there. There's some really, really bad YA out there. But have you read literature? There is some bad literature out there. I know, I've had to read it for seminars. There is always be bad writing in any period. I've had lectures about books that make me cringe with the style of writing or with the characters that are lauded by some scholars as amazing examples of this kind of person back in the day, when they're just this one-dimensional stereotype. And before anyone gets on me saying, oh, it's another time, oh, that's an opinion, yeah, it's an opinion, it's subjective, but also, time and trends may change. Bad writing will always be bad writing. And there's going to be bad writing in every period, in every genre. That doesn't negate how fantastic some YA books are, and the importance of it as a genre to a growing group of people who didn't really culturally exist until about 70 years ago. So, why do people hate it so much? What's so wrong with YA that people cannot stand it to the point that they leave it out of the canon? They don't want to study it. If you read it over a certain age, you're just wasting your time. What is so wrong with YA? I have one answer. It's the exact same thing that made it popular. Teenagers. And also genre, but that sounded snappier. Because YA is written for and marketed to teenagers, it's written off. It's just kids' books, it's not literature, it's no good. It's the same issue with genre fiction. Genre fiction is largely left out of the canon, and if a genre book is considered to be good, it's transcending its genre. Just take a look at 1984, a dystopian novel, or Frankenstein, arguably one of the first sci-fi novels, and definitely a gothic horror novel. And the thing about this is YA is tied to genre. It's just as likely that a YA book that you pick up will be a coming-of-age story set in modern times as it is to be fantasy, sci-fi, or dystopian. Just because it's for teenagers doesn't mean it can't be good. Just because it's good genre fiction doesn't mean it's not genre fiction. As I've said before, YA tackles important issues that are near and dear to teenagers' hearts, and teaches them life lessons that they carry with them into adulthood. And for a significant amount of the genre, it does that with a diverse cast of interesting characters and really good prose. So who says it can't be literature? Thank you guys so much for watching this little video essay of mine. I really hope you enjoyed this, even though it's a little different from my usual content. If you have anything to add, or any opinions about YA yourself, or if I changed your mind maybe, please leave it in the comments below, and feel free to subscribe to my channel. I put out videos every 1 to 2 weeks, and as I've said before, I make LARP, fashion and writing videos. Have a great day!